Good morning, everyone. I'm Kimberly Chalia with PHCA. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, Best Practices in Menu Planning, presented by Julie Cavalier. A few quick updates to share before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the PHCA website. The webinar has been approved for 1 continuing education credit for all attendees. For those who provided an AB number, credits will be uploaded shortly. As we begin today, all attendees should be in listen-only mode. Please ensure that you are on mute. Please feel free to submit your questions via the chat icon on your screen, and we'll make sure to get to those questions at the end of today's session. Now I will pass it over to Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, which is best practices in menu planning. I'll introduce myself. I am a registered dietitian. I've been a registered dietitian for about 25 years, where the majority of my career has been in seniors care. I most recently started a new role as Director of Stakeholder Relations and Innovations at MealSuite, which is a food service and menu technology software company. And before that, though, I spent the majority of my career, the other 23, 24 years, for corporate chains, senior care chains, leading their menu planning teams, their nutrition care teams, food service operation teams. I was a frontline worker myself, getting up to that point. So my experience comes from a lot of different areas, and I hope you take a few key messages back with you today when looking at menu planning for seniors. So there are a few things that we do want to go through today. And some of the things are more about the trends in food services and menu planning and what the new seniors expect, and going above and beyond just, menu planning for seniors, and then looking at some best practice and things that need to change. So we have an hour. I do want to leave some time for questions and answers. Excuse me. So and I think there's a chat box where I can check in at the end and see if there's been any questions. But I think I'll just kind of, there's a lot of information, so I think I'll just kind of mull through until the question and answer period. So if you can just hold tight until that point, or put your question in the chat box if you don't want to forget it. But so I do want to start with the changing landscape in menu planning. When we started in menu planning 25 years ago, seniors in, long-term care or retirement, AL, whatever we want to call it, whichever area it was, seniors were driving into the long-term care home with a car and able to walk in the front door. And we're definitely not seeing that today. By the time the seniors get to a long-term care or skilled nursing facility, they're not driving anymore. And so, with that, you think, okay, well, the independence changes and their food preferences change. What they were preparing at home for themselves could have been different. And so we really have to look at the changing landscape of what's happening. So I pulled up some population data just to show, right now, this is 2023, and it's one of the first times where the birth rate has not kept up with, the aging population. So we're not having as many children to help build that foundation of society, the people that will be working in healthcare, to support the older population. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but about 3/4 of the way up, it's at 60 years old, so between 55 and 60, and that's where the majority of the population is. It's the first time in history where 60 plus has outweighed 10 or 9. I believe it's 9 and under. It's the first time ever. And right now we're seeing strains, with not a lot of people in the working force age, not as many people to take care of those in the older population. it will actually get worse. The next 20 years, if you think about this pyramid moving up a couple of bars, where, you know, people at the lower range will be in working age, and those 60 will then become 80. There will be a bigger crisis on our hands than we thought we had today. And this was projected, you know, many moons ago in the 90s. We knew this was going to happen, but we didn't properly plan for it. As menu planners, this does put a lot more time and effort into menu planning because of the type of people that we need to menu plan for. Where historically, you know, we were planning for daycares and school and colleges. Now we're mainly doing large menu planning for seniors, senior health facilities of all shapes and sizes, and not even so much the acute care system because the turnover is so quick, but it definitely has changed the way we menu plan. So just a few statistics and insights. We've all heard about the baby boomers aging as they start coming into 65 plus. In the next 20 years, they'll be the biggest of all the generations. So I just spoke about that on the last slide. But if we look at the number of residents entering U.S. nursing homes, the number is large. And do we have enough beds or suites or facilities, whatever we want to call it, and how have we been planning for this? And so it's not just nursing homes, it's also assisted living facilities. And it's going to be getting worse. And the one thing that I did want to mention, that last bullet at the bottom, is the lifespan of a nursing home resident is about 2.5 years. Women tend to be a little longer than men, but the average is about 2.5 years, which means by the time seniors do get to a skilled nursing facility, nursing home, they are pretty frail, which makes menu planning, not just the global menu planning, like how do we meet the needs of all the people in a particular facility, but the needs of the individual become so much more complex and need a lot more time. So some of the other factors in and around the healthcare system is, you know, congregate dining isn't natural for most people. Most people that come into a seniors facility, whichever way, were maybe living alone, maybe with one other person. If they were living with a family, you know, it's not a large dining room of 25 people, 60 people, 100 people. And so we can menu plan and make, you know, the best menus, but we have to take into consideration some of these things that happen when someone comes into the healthcare system or a seniors facility that changes, you know, not so much what they're going to eat, but how they feel. And it really does change how their perspective is on the menu. Menus are one of the things, and food is one of the things that most people could control it right until the end of their life. So with all good intentions of creating really good menu plans, you know, throwing someone into a congregate dining setting, you know, when they're not used to it, or they're not, you know, they came there, you know, after a traumatic event with a spouse, loved one, partner, family member, or themselves. So we need to keep that into consideration. Also with the social interaction, you know, we're coming on the heels of COVID. We're not done yet, but there was a lot of isolation and coming into a seniors facility, you know, now it's almost like forced interaction. And even if they were or are extroverts, you know, being thrown into an environment where you're all eating together and all socializing together and having, you know, people awake at night or walking down the hall or slamming door. I mean, you know, so that all affects not so much the menu planning, but their nutrition care and status, because it does affect the psychology of eating. And so with good intentions, making really good menus, either personally at our population level, a lot of these things can affect their intake. We are seeing that the seniors coming into seniors facilities of all the very variable kinds, whether it's IAL, IL, or skilled nursing, they are more medically complex. There's a reason why they're coming in there. It's usually not, by design or choice. Usually something drew them there, a loss of a family member or abilities. So they are much more complex. And so meal planning becomes more complex because they're medically more complex. And oftentimes their nutrition status coming in isn't great. I mean, there's lots of research that says, they just weren't drinking enough. They weren't having enough protein. So the muscle mass on their legs and so forth were not as strong. And, now they're having problems walking because they don't have enough muscle, and they weren't eating enough vitamins and minerals. It was whatever they could access or whatever was easy. Some creating menus that are nutritious, but that they will eat. So you can make all really great nutritious meals, but if they don't eat it, it's all for nothing. So these are the things that we have to contend with when considering our menu planning. It's not just about the menu. And then there's the food service departments of the senior care facilities that have really been spun into a loop. And remember, it's the food service operations that has to operationalize and create the food that comes on the menu. So we can plan great, lovely menus, but if we can't execute on them, then that's all for nothing. So there's been a bit of a trend to more in-room dining, whether because of infection control or outbreaks, because they had to do it for a period of time and now they like it and they want to do that. But in-room dining takes different equipment and operations and carts and services than congregate dining does. And so, when we're menu planning for congregate dining and being served out of serveries, it doesn't always match what's going to work on a tray service or in-room dining. The good news is many senior like AL and IL retirement homes are starting to do food delivery services for in-room dining. So it takes the pressure off the bigger food service department that does the larger menu execution. And then there's a select menu for in-room dining, but not all seniors facilities have those capabilities. So you're really trying to fit a square peg in a round hole when you're creating menus for congregate and servery dining, and then trying to do room service, where oftentimes we hear the food is cold, or it doesn't look appetizing on the tray, or we don't have the right equipment to transport, or it comes late, or so there's just a lot of things that we have to consider when we're menu planning if there's both in-room dining and congregate dining. The other thing affecting food service departments is the inflation of food costs. I think the last time I looked, it was 11.7% increase in food costs. So menu, you're getting feedback from residents from the various food forums and menu planning events, and you want to create a really good menu, and then a broccoli's $6. So then there's decisions that need to be made. Well, then do we go to frozen, which changes? You have to change the recipe, and do they actually like it? And is it going to change the way it tastes and the quality at the end? And is this something we want to do? Do we just want to take broccoli off the menu? And that's only one food ingredient. Inflation on dairy has gone up, and anything with wheat has gone up. So you can't change everything on the menu, but you do want to keep those things that are tried and true. But it does change the menu planning process and all the thought processes that go around creating a menu that people will eat within the budget that's allotted. Also looking at the actual facility for storage and space. So how often does the food delivery truck come, and do we have the right facilities to keep food? And this becomes a problem during regular service. It's we have an order, usually it's 2 or 3 times a week, but you're going to be short a cook this weekend, And we need more ready to serve items, stuff that just can be, pulled and heated. And well, you need storage for that. And if facilities weren't made with ample storage and freezer space, we can't even plan for those times when you have, low labor and need to buy and store extra, meals that are easy and ready to serve that anybody can handle. So looking at space and storage also affects menu planning, because in our right now with the staffing crisis and low frontline staff and shortages, we want to plan for menus for low labor, and we can, but you also have to have the place to put the food, and we're falling short on many of those areas. The food service department, when we're menu planning, we have a variety of seniors that we need to feed, and they don't all like the same thing. So more and more food service departments are planning menus for a la carte service. And that's to, meet the needs of more people than just, the majority will like what's on the regular menu, but there are those that don't like the offering and will need an a la carte. But to execute an a la carte does take special consideration for equipment, the type of staff you have that can execute on that menu. So, you may want, the residents may want fish and chips on an a la carte menu, but there's no fryer, there's no deep fryer. So how do you execute on that? And would they accept a fish and chips that's in an oven? And who would be able to do that in 5 to 10 minutes? You have the staff for that. So when we're menu planning for the larger area, for the large menu, we also have to menu plan for the a la carte and what we can actually execute on in a timely manner, and that we have equipment for and the staffing for. There's a number of special diets and personal menus. So, we're menu planning for the larger population that's going to meet the needs of most of the people. But we saw in the previous slides about the complexity and the frailty of seniors that come into any kind of seniors facility. And so they will need special diets, and not so much for lifestyle reasons, people that choose to be vegetarian because, their affiliation or affinity to, protect and save, animals and agriculture, and what have you, whatever their personal beliefs are. Those menus we can plan for those menus. The special diets are the ones that come and they're very specific, low sodium, or a certain amount of carbohydrate, and a certain amount of fat, and very specialized, specific. Now, when we're talking about seniors, generally speaking, we like to liberalize. It is way more important that they eat than to be on something restrictive and then have any risk of malnutrition, because they will decompensate very quickly with nutritional deficiencies. So generally speaking, your dietitian and or nutrition manager will look to see how restrictive does this person need to be. If they were in the hospital or were on a particular diet prior to coming into the facility, is this still something that's needed? Are they at risk for malnutrition or not eating? Can we liberalize? Because special and personal diets, although we can do them and we can menu plan for those specific things, but do they really need them? And that takes special time and attention to do those assessments and conversation interviews. Also, along the same vein is the cultural and religious menus. So there's, the global menu that we'll make for most of the people. And then we may have pockets of different cultures or religions that require a menu specific within the same facility. So, it can be handled in multiple ways, depending on how many residents that request or need those cultural and religious menus and meals. So oftentimes, some places do have two complete different menus. Some of them have two various kitchens, and others deal with it on an a la carte basis. and others deal with it on an individual personal menu basis. So it really just depends on how many residents you have of a particular religious or cultural background as to how we would plan that menu. The other trends that, of course, very near and dear to my heart is technology usage. And the technology, we are seeing it more and more in food service departments. Historically, it was, in the clinical areas with the electronic health records, the clinical electronic health records. And that's where we usually see it first, or nurse call bells and that kind of thing. That's where the technology was used, first in seniors care, but by far, we are seeing it in food service departments. It's one of the reasons why, I left seniors care as an operator and went over to Meal Suite, because I did see the need and the use for technology to help streamline all these things that I just talked about. And you still need the person to do the menu planning, but it helps on the execution and the thinking around costing and nutrient analysis and what products are available and the ingredients. And if this is short and out of stock, what can be substituted. And so the technology does all that and more. And we are seeing it more and more in food service departments and in all different areas. So there's the back of the house where the recipes are stored and the production and the census and the forecasting is, and the ordering of the food and the ingredients, right to the front of the house in the dining rooms, using touch screens for residents to choose their meals or do in-room dining or go to restaurants within a senior care or ALIL and order and get their bill sent right to their monthly invoice. And so all those things are available, and it does create efficiencies in workflow and brings time back to the front line because you're not behind a desk doing all these manual processes yourself. The other trends affecting the food service department is the regulatory framework. I do have a slide on that, but all the rules and regulations that go into how to menu plan and what we need to consider, and all the rules in the check boxes. The media and social media scrutiny is something. It's been there, in the last several years, but we really saw it the last couple of years because of COVID and what happened in seniors' homes with people getting meals in styrofoam clamshell containers on a tray, and perhaps they couldn't get all the food items they needed because of staffing shortages or supply chain issues. And then it ends up on Twitter. Like, this is what my mother got for her lunch. And, it could be some drabby looking beans with some wieners on the side and no vegetable and no, in a white, cold clamshell container. And that ends up, in the media. And is that what's served every day? No. Is that what's usually served? No. But when there was, staffing crisis and supply chain issues, and they're trying to get food, something that, they could do without a lot of skill, without a lot of labor, getting something, and then it ends up in the media, and it's really demoralizes a food service department that tries to get food to people in their care with very limited resources. And now that's stuck. There's almost like a bad reputation. So if you go into a skilled nursing facility, if you go into, this place or that place, did you see the food that they serve? Meanwhile, it was, a one-time thing during a crisis that now has stuck. And getting past those reviews and those pictures is really hard for a food service department to crawl out of. Oh, I got regulatory framework in there twice. Okay. Okay. Some places had, 4-bed wards. Those weren't nice to see. Nobody wants them, but because of infection control and all this, there's most places are getting rid of any four beds anywhere and going to 3 and 2 and hopefully 1. And that's where we want to be if we're thinking about ourselves in the next 20, 30, 40 years. What kind of facility do we want to be in? But it means a loss of revenue for the operator, and loss of revenue usually means cut back on menu, money, budget, equipment, and all that fun stuff. So we need to consider all that when we're menu planning as to how much money do we actually have. There's not a lot of suites and long-term care beds out there. I mean, now that we know that the need is out there and that it will exponentially grow, many operators are building retirement homes and places and suites for seniors to go live. But where there's waiting lists, there are vacancies as well. Obviously, occupancy in some areas, some places, some areas geographically can be a problem. But when we saw the pyramid, the population pyramid, we could see that in the next 20 years, there's going to be a real crisis if there's not more suites or beds. And then there's a cost to that, and how many people can afford it. We need to consider all those things. I did talk about supply chain and staffing, HR crisis in food service departments. That affects all departments, but if we can't get the food we need and we can't get the people to cook it, then we really need to look at menus that are, pull, heat, and serve. And then what does that do to the food quality if we have to do that? So these are all things that we need to consider. I did quickly mention the political and regulatory framework. And the only thing really I'll say about that is there's the federal regulations on menu planning and our state surveys who are looking at, our menu planning and RDs, dietitians signed off and who signed it off. And, the private oversight, many of these facilities are private. And so there's rules and regulations as to their expectations and policies. So for healthcare professionals or professionals that are creating menus, there's this fear of needing to comply with rules rather than doing the work itself. And I want to tie that back into technology, because the technology creates the framework and to meet some of the highest level rules that can all be changed and editable. It's flexible, but that's the good thing about technology, is that the technology is already engineered in a way that it takes a lot of the thinking away for the political and regulatory and the menu planning policy out of the equation, because it's already built in. So technology is definitely changing healthcare, and it really does have to integrate with electronic health records. Like, that's technology in healthcare started with the clinical EHR, as I mentioned, but we're really now seeing technology in all aspects of seniors care, including in menu planning. So it really does go hand in glove. It increases the client satisfaction scores, because you can be so much more flexible when you have a system that creates menus and menu ideas and menu options than having pen and paper and spending it's just a ton of time to do menu planning and ensuring nutritionals are met, and cost, and making sure that it's accurate. I mean, back in the old days, it was a very labor intensive process when we had to create menus by scratch and go to all the nutrition files to make sure that we're meeting all the nutritionals, with a ruler and a pencil and a calculator and calculate. And if somebody, and if a food product didn't show up, what did it now do? And you're having to go back and recalculate and sign off. Where now, with technology, it's, you insert one for the other and pops all the costs and whether something's available. And what it did to the nutritionals and all that fun stuff. So it just takes hours and hours of work away. And menu planning is one piece of a bigger picture. I mean, when we talk about menu planning, I talked about all the things that influence the food service department. Here we call it a food service ecosystem. That it's only one piece of a bigger puzzle. When we're menu planning, we have to consider all these things. Like, we can't just put, a lasagna on a menu, knowing that with the current inflation and supply chain issues and the inventory issues with some of the ingredients, that it could be $8 a piece. So it's not just about putting something on a menu, it's considering all the other factors that would affect the operations and then the satisfaction of the resident at the end. And so our seniors, so we pretty much all have a phone. Our seniors are pretty savvy on being able to go to menu boards and, they can point and click on what they want. They could order their own food. If you could use a phone, you could use a menu system. And that's the expectation, is that they want flexibility. They want us to build a menu for them, but they want us to build it with them. So what is the feedback? And how do you get the analytics as to what are they liking? What don't they like? What's the waste like? So how do you forecast? And so technology also does help with that as well. But how do you get residents involved in meal planning, and not just the 5 vocal residents that come to the food forum or the food committee meeting, whatever you call it, because everybody in the facility is eating. And so how are you getting that information to plan and forecast menus? How are you getting the information on what their diet requirements are? And so our seniors do have higher expectations because they are coming in with a higher degree of knowledge when it comes to menus and different foods. They were able to get food delivery at their door, and they're gonna want it still. They were able to get gluten-free stuff, and they're gonna want it still. So it's not just about the medical diets or the therapeutic diets or the puree diets. No, it's a whole other realm of menu expectations that our seniors are coming in wanting. So there are some long-standing best practices that are tried and true. They're not going to go away. Doesn't matter whether you're doing it on a manual, paper-based system or on a computer or tech or whatever. We always look for color on the plate. Now, I would ask that you close your eyes for a minute and think about a chicken breast with mushroom sauce, some steamed cauliflower, and a portion of mashed potato on a white plate. So as you close your eyes and you think about that, you're like, well, it might taste okay, but it surely doesn't look appetizing. And we eat with our eyes. And so one of the first things we do when we're menu planning is we have to consider the plate. What's it going to look like when it's all done? They could all very well taste very good and fresh and local and all kinds of great stuff. But if it looks not good, we're already coming into the meal thinking, this isn't going to be very great. So color on the plate is one of the just long-standing best practices that we consider. The other thing is variety. Is your menu a 21-day, a 28-day? It doesn't matter. But if you're having chicken every day, and maybe the residents want chicken every day, but then let's look at, okay, does it have to be the chicken breast? Can it be a minced chicken option, and then the chicken breast, and then the chicken leg, and one is fried, and one is roasted, and one is breaded? And so it's not always the same thing. Now, variety is also not just in the proteins. But generally speaking, we wouldn't, if we put a chicken breast on a menu, we wouldn't want chicken breast on for another 5 meals at least or later, because we want that variety. But you have to do that with your vegetables. So think about peas. It could be peas on the menu, but then at lunch and then at dinner, there's a medley and it's got peas, carrots, and corn. And then the next day, there's a shepherd's pie and it's got peas in it again. So when we think about variety, we got to think about all the things, not just, the center of the plate. The other longstanding best practice, and most states require this, is an RD approval, a registered dietitian approval of the menu. And if it comes from a corporation, or you're buying menus, that if you make any changes, then those changes need to be approved by a dietitian. And that's to ensure, well, all those things that I just talked about were considered. Portion control. Well, we know that seniors, generally speaking, don't eat big portions, but we want a fair enough portion that it's that keeps costs and nutritionals in line and in the right box. So when we're creating menus, we're considering the color and the variety and whether we can get the meal and that the dietitian approved it. But how much do we give? Is that piece of lasagna, if we give a piece of lasagna that's a 6 by 6 inch square, well, the nutritionals and the cost on that would be not so great. But if it's a 3 by 3 square, 4 by 4 square, depending, that might be a better portion. And so we need to actually say that. We need to say half a cup of, potato, or, 4 ounces of chicken breast. So when we're creating menus, we also have to create the portion that goes along with it. And that goes along with analyzing all the recipes and what the whole recipe value is. And when we're planning menus, of course, we don't just plan for center of the plate. We have to plan for the carbohydrate, the fruit, the vegetables, the snacks in between, and all the a la cartes and all that other stuff. We have to meet the dietary reference intakes. That's why you need an RD approval. But that's the basis of the menu, is, making sure that it's nutritious, and not only nutritious, that it's something that seniors will want to eat, and seniors of a variety of cultures and backgrounds will want to eat. And food first approach. We never want to make a menu to think, well, if they don't eat it, there's always, a supplement. When I say supplement, I don't work for any, supplement companies, but Boost or Onshore or one of those, companies. I mean, yes, they're there, but we don't plan a menu thinking that if they don't eat it, that's the go-to, that's the Band-Aid. We want to create menus so that they're eating the food, and they're appreciating the food and liking the food, and they're getting their nutrition from food and not from supplements. But some things we do need to consider, they are long-standing practices, but we really do need to get into the new age, is overproduction. With food costs the way they are and supply chain issues, we're overproducing because we weren't sure what choice people were going to choose, and we didn't want to run out. And so there's all this waste and all this overproduction that was happening, and we really need to take really closer stock of what is going in the garbage and what people are eating, because that money can go back into a better quality menu item than just having just a bunch of stuff and throwing it in the garbage, because we just didn't know how much they were going to choose this time. On the paper-based system, I think I talked about that, and the time that it takes to create menus from scratch on a paper-based system. And the other things we need to consider is taking the director, the nutrition manager, out from under the menu planning tasks that take so long and bringing them back at the table side. They need to be in the dining room. They need to be talking to the residents. They need to be getting the feedback. They need to be seeing what's being overproduced, what's in the kitchen, how things are being cooked, how, if people are happy, and not stuck to the paper and pen of creating menus, because there's a lot of considerations that need to go into it. And the two choice menu is another thing to reconsider. with the evolution of technology, we can create really good menus that's one choice and create all kinds of a la carte menus based on the food service equipment and operations and staffing and that's available. So when we're menu planning now, where there's so many new things that we're taking into consideration that perhaps we're always sort of in the back burner, but really need to be highlighted more so now than ever. And I think I touched upon a lot of these things in the previous slides, and I do want to leave time for questions. So perhaps I won't go through all of these, but the seasonal and local, I don't think we touched upon that in previous slides, and that's something that seniors really are asking for. They come in, they've if they've lived in your state or that town for all their lives, and they want to support their local farmers or local vendors, local retail, and want foods from those places. And so creating menus with that is very important. And 24/7 availability of food is also something that not everybody eats at the same time. And if someone comes back from an appointment, they want to know that there will be food there. If they wake up at 3 a.m. and just need something to settle them, they want to know that something's available. So having food 24/7 is also one of the things we need to consider. Family participation, it's not just about the senior. We've said right from the beginning that seniors are coming in much more medically frail or complex, and so it's their family that's their decision maker, and so then they need to be participating in the menu planning process. And although even if a senior is not capable of making decisions around where they're going to live or banking or care decisions, oftentimes they can make decisions around what foods they want to eat right to the very end. So we can't take that away from them. We don't want to go to the family instead of the senior if they can still make food decisions. But where they can't or when they can't, the family participation becomes very important. And often families want to be able to order food from their own phone or computer to the facility, knowing what their family member would want or has asked for, and be able to have a system to do that with. There's lots of resources, excuse me, out there that you can, your dietary manager or if your dietitian have access to, or you do, through the internet. There is one group, osnac.fnat.com. They do a bunch of best practices. It's mostly for long-term care. It's a resource that is utilized by menu planners all over the world, Australia and England and Canada and everyone. So the really good best practice menu planning guides there. Meal Suite has complimentary downloads, and your own, if you're in any kind of facility, if there's a nutrition manager or dietitian that you can reach out to, there's all kinds of places you can get best practices on menu planning. So just I wanted to show you in terms of a diagram that the traditional menu planning usually has two choice menu where you have your choice of protein, starch, and vegetable, and then your choice of dessert. And that's the traditional way of menu planning. I just want to show you a couple of other options. Is to have one menu instead of the two of everything. You have one entree, and then you have with the sides, and then you have an also available menu. And that also available menu or a la carte menu, whatever you want to call it, is based on the needs of your own facility or your own community. And so that is another trend we see with menu planning. Is just you're going to get the one item that's really good quality and fresh, and then if you don't like beef or don't eat beef, then there's going to be an also available offering every day. And then the other way we're seeing another option is having two center of plates or 2 proteins, but the same sides, and an also available menu that's a scaled down version. But there's all kinds of different options out there. I'm just showing you the three that we see the most out there. So these are just some sample templates that can be used if you do a menu from scratch on paper. There's different templates and things that can be used to help along the process. It is still very time consuming, but there are menu planning templates out there. And the most important thing in menu planning is evaluating your menu. Did they like it? Did it work? Was it within cost? Was there a lot thrown out? Was the recipe of good quality? Would you put that menu item again? How many portions? Where do you need to change anything in terms of where you get your ingredients? Evaluating your menu plan is just as important as the menu planning itself. All right, so I think that's it. I do want to leave time for questions. So I will pause there, and if there's my email address, if you did want to have a sidebar conversation, I'm here to help. Other than that, I will take questions.
Thanks, Julie. I did post a couple of reminders throughout today's session to post any questions that you might have in the chat box. If you end up coming up with a question later on, or don't feel comfortable presenting your question within today's platform, that's a-okay. You can certainly reach out to Jolie or myself, and we will make sure that we answer your question. And I'm just gonna wait and see if anything comes through here for another moment or two. Julie, I thank you so much for taking the time. This was very valuable information, and I appreciate you presenting today.
You're welcome.
I do not see any questions coming through. So again, feel free to reach out to Julie or myself. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.